Hey everybody, it's your old pal Mike. I hope you're happy, healthy, and safe, and welcome back to the second installment of the Behind the Bridge Bible, a series where I try to show you how to harness the weird and wild resonances that happen behind the bridge of your Jazzmaster, your Jaguar, really any guitar with a length of string behind the bridge. That includes 335s with a trapeze tailpiece, or like a Gretsch with a Bigsby. You can make these things work on any guitar with that hardware complement. If you haven't seen the first installment of the series, I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. In that one, I talk about how to get the most out of plucked notes behind the bridge. But in this one, well, we're going to do something a little bit different, and let me tell you why. To open up this video, I've got to start by saying thank you, because I have received so many kind and wonderful messages about the video that I recently did for Guitar.com, wherein I compare the Mastery and Descendant vibratos. I talk about the differences between them and the similarities. And in that video, I used some of my own playing as background music, and most of the messages that I have gotten about that video have been about my playing specifically, and that makes me feel really good. Like, it has taken me a long time to be seen as a guitar player and not simply as a tech, which is still a noble profession, but all the same, it feels good to be seen and heard and recognized. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Now, I got some messages about my playing overall, and that was lovely, but there is one part of the video that seems to have captured the attention of most of the people in my inbox, and it is a portion of the video that I'm especially proud of. So let's watch it, and we'll come back and talk about the technique I used to get the sound that I had. Did you catch that? Did you see what I was doing there? If you didn't, what I'm doing is I'm bending notes behind the bridge. I am altering what I'm playing on the fretboard by pulling up toward myself. And this is a technique that I've been working on for quite a long time, years in fact. And it was born initially out of my love of pedal steel sounds, those high, lonesome bent notes that kind of hang in the air like smoke rings or a thought left unspoken. It is a sound that I've always wanted to nail on the guitar, but you know, a lot of us bend notes on the fretboard and that sounds fine. But it's not the same. It's not the same as holding a chord and I think that sounds really cool, and it's completely different from the sound of a bent note on the fretboard. You can do that too. I don't know, it just sounds different to me. It's got a different emotional center, it's got a different feel. So this is a technique that I want to share with you because, you know, knowledge is power. Now, I'm not ashamed to admit that it took me quite a while to get this technique down, and I'm still sort of okay at it. So, you know, if you try this at home, you practice for hours and you're still not getting it, don't worry. I'm right there with you. We are not judging here. Everyone's different as far as being a student, learning things, adapting. That's all okay. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the technique, how I implement it into my music, as well as some tips about setup and other things that could affect how easy or difficult this is for you. So let's dig in. For this video, I'll be demonstrating using 3PO. That's my gold Jazzmaster style guitar, totally custom made for me by my friends at Shelton Electric Instruments a few years ago. This guitar features a Mastery hardware setup for incredibly hot Curtis Novak pickups. That's 2 wide ranges, one in the neck, one in the bridge, a gold foil in the middle that has a hologram insert. I love that thing. A lipstick behind the bridge to capture those ghostly reverberations behind the bridge, and some custom wiring that I have customized like 11 times because I'm indecisive and I'm always looking to wring that last little bit of tone out of my guitars. So there's a brief rundown for those of you who are curious. I'm sure you will hear more about this guitar at some point in the future. To get started, I'm just going to show you how I started working with this technique, and it was kind of built around a little melody that I wrote for myself that sort of taught me the basics of how to pull the string while I was picking, while I was trying to do other things with my left and right hands. What I wrote revolves around an open G chord, something like this. Nothing too fancy, pretty easy for most people to do. However, I'm going to focus on bending the G string only, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm not really fretting anything within the chord. I just started practicing pulling it up a whole step, like so. And you can see, hopefully, in this camera down here, that I'm using 2 fingers to bend. That's because, like, using 1 finger for me is just really tricky. I don't have quite enough strength to really do the job. So 2 fingers, the pinky and the ring finger for me work best. But all I'm doing is pulling them up a whole step till they sound relatively in tune. And I just kept practicing that, and once I felt comfortable, well, I started making things a little bit more complicated on myself, like this. All I'm doing is playing a G chord, then fretting the A on the G string at the 2nd fret, and while I'm doing that, I'm pulling it up to the 3rd, which is B. I don't know about you, but I really need like a melodic center to whatever I'm practicing, or else my mind starts wandering and I don't end up retaining whatever technique or information I'm trying to focus on. So I wrote a little tune, centers around that same G thing that I showed you earlier, and it helped me kind of get familiar with bending the strings behind the bridge and how much pressure I needed to apply without being so incredibly boring that my mind just wasn't paying attention. So maybe it'll help you. Here it is. Now, as you're probably already aware, it is pretty easy to overshoot or undershoot the mark here. Bending behind the bridge like this isn't exactly precise all the time, and it does take a lot of practice to know where that sweet spot is. So take this as an example. I believe in you. I think you're utterly capable of this as well. So let me know how it goes when you end up practicing down in the comments below. Also, there's another little run that I do to kind of warm up when I know I'm going to be using this in a recording session or in a live situation. And when you're live, intonation, you know, it's for the birds. It's really about having a good time. But this little exercise should help you kind of hone in on the right notes at the right time. Now, with all of this information and practice, you're going to have to make a choice at some point, and that choice is whether or not it's easiest to push down on the string, that is toward the body, or pull up on the string toward your head. And for me, I found that pulling up is a lot more comfortable than pulling down, especially in this guitar with the pickup back here behind the bridge. There's not quite enough room to easily push on the string to get the notes I need. So no matter what guitar I'm using, I'm most often pulling up toward myself. And that seems to work with the way I pick the guitar too, because I'm also like trying to pluck as well. And I find that when I'm pushing down, that is uncomfortable for my picking hand. So push down, pull up toward you. Either way is valid, but one of them is likely going to be a lot more comfortable for you overall. So have a think about that. That's something to really consider here. In that Guitar.com video, I was also utilizing harmonics in the part that I was playing, and the harmonics make it a little bit easier to focus on the bend and not so much what your fretting hand is doing. For instance, that part that I played was... So harmonics kind of make it easy to think about the notes that you're bending rather than what you're playing on the neck, and that can be a lifesaver. I've used that live many times. I've written solos around that, and it's a neat trick to pull out for sure. I have absolutely had people come up after shows and ask me what the hell I did, so yeah, use that in good health. This bending behind the bridge technique can also be really fun in open tunings where you're like bending up to a major from a minor, or from a major to like a suspended. It can be a really nice tool to add some color to whatever chords you're playing. Now, some notes about setup for you. String gauge here can absolutely be a limiting factor in the effectiveness of your bends. I use 11 to 50 on Jazzmasters and usually a lot heavier on Jaguars. I find that heavier strings on the shorter scale really tighten everything up, and it feels a lot better to dig in. This guitar, 3PO, is a full-scale 25.5-inch Jazzmaster guitar, so 11 to 50 feels right for me. But when you're bending, if you find yourself having some trouble really manipulating those strings, you can lighten up. You can definitely lighten the G or B or both, or just whichever one you're bending most often to make this exercise a lot easier on you. So with my set, the G string is an 18 plain. I could totally see you stepping down to a 17 or a 15, just in case you needed to be able to really wail on these things back here to make exciting bends or exciting chord shapes. And it can also increase the speed with which you are going to reach whatever note you're bending up to. So, consider that if you're having trouble. It could make things a lot easier for you. It's also worth noting that this might be a lot easier on a Jaguar for most players than it is on a Jazzmaster. A Jazzmaster with its longer scale length will have a little bit more perceived playing tension, or what we call compliance, which is how easy it is to bend the string up to a certain note. The Jaguar at 24 inches is going to have a lot less perceived playing tension, and as such, you can bend them a little easier, and I find that behind the bridge, this becomes a lot less complicated. So with a little less tension on the Jaguar, bending strings behind the bridge, or just bending strings in general, can be a lot easier overall. So those of you who have a Jaguar and a Jazzmaster, compare and contrast, see which one works better for you. And those of you with the Jaguar only, well, you're in luck, because you're probably going to have a lot easier time with this than those of us who only use Jazzmasters. As is the case with most of my guitars, 3PO is wearing a mastery bridge, and I think that the deep V grooves on these saddles really make it a lot easier for me to pull up on the string and not worry about it skipping out of the slot. If you've got a stay trem or a Mustang bridge or the stock bridge, you may want to pay attention to what happens when you bend the string back here, because it could very easily fall out of its groove. Those of you who have a tune-o-matic or an adjust-o-matic model, you should be okay, but you may also need to deepen those grooves as well. So keep that in mind. The hardware does make a difference, but, play around with it, see what works for you. With all of that said, bending behind the bridge is one of my favorite tricks to pull out, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm playing a show live, or I'm in a recording studio doing a session, or I'm making a video for a guitar magazine, and inadvertently drawing attention to myself. I think that this is one of those tricks that you can pull out, and there's always a wow factor associated with it. It's the kind of thing that a lot of people haven't seen done before, and I think that makes it a really effective, fun, and musical trick that you can use regardless of the genre that you prefer to play, whether it's shoegaze or country or rock and roll or emo. Do people still play emo? I used to love that. Love me some Get Up Kids, love me some early Jimmy 8 World. We'll talk about that later. And as all of you out there start experimenting with this technique and making your own sounds with it, please let me know about it. Tag me in videos, share them in the comments below, hit me up on Instagram so I can repost. I want to see what kind of sonic mayhem you get up to with this technique, because, oh man, I just love seeing people discover something new they can do with the guitar. And again, this is why the Jazzmaster form factor is so important to me, is because there's an endless amount of weird things you can do with the string length behind the bridge and with the string length in the normal places. Anyway, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourself and each other. And yeah, let me know what you get up to. And thank you so much for continuously coming back to the channel, for liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, all of that. It means the world to me. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, and we'll see you in the next one.